Finally, it's time to address my favorite knight maneuver, the artistic but poisonous step-back boogie. J. Silman versus M. Montchalin, Richland, 1985. White to move. White notices that potential weaknesses lie on b6, c5, and e5. No, c5 isn't a typo. The seemingly solid c5 pawn can become loose after a well-timed a4-a5 push undermines its defender on b6. Of course, both b6 and e5 might become tender if white could bring pieces to bear on them. But how can this be done? Let me remind you of our early philosophical chess thought. Chess mastery is a mixture of knowledge, awareness, and willpower. This is yet another example of that motto. White knows, i.e., has the knowledge based on an often seen patterns, that this kind of pawn structure can lead to difficulties for black. He's aware that the aforementioned pawns could become weak if there was some way to get his pieces within striking range. And finally, he wants a maximum piece setup that will accomplish these goals. So what pieces in the white army will be able to exert pressure against the designated targets? Clearly the bishop can't, since it's a light squared bishop and the pawns lay on dark squares. The knight, though, would be a tower of strength on c4 where it would kick the enemy queen and take direct aim at both b6 and e5. White's queen can also join the party on e3, hitting c5 in anticipation of the a4-a5 break and also giving e4 some support. While placing it on c3 seems even better since it eyes both c5 and e5. That leaves the a4 pawn with its a4-a5 aspirations and the f2 pawn with its dreams of f2-f4. So how can white create such a position? This calls for the step-back boogie. Knight b1 double exclam. A shocking move that is very anti-intuitive but also very logical. The knight returns to its beginning square because it just wasn't happy on c3. Remember that a piece is only happy if it's on a square where it helps with the overall game plan. In this case, the c3 knight might look okay on c3, but it's not addressing all the issues that were discussed earlier. However, wouldn't it be a killer on c4? And suddenly one sees that this odd retreat ties everything together. c3 is now clear for white's queen, while the knight will head for c4 via a3 or d2. Queen f6. This allows white to make his vision a reality. Instead, moves such as bishop d7 or bishop b7 would limit white's advantage. Another possibility is knight f6, when aside from queen e3, interesting is knight a3, exclam question mark. If queen takes, this wins a piece immediately with a triple attack on the knight. I'm just, well, yeah, again, if queen takes here, then knight takes b6, so knight takes d5. With a pleasant edge for white. Black, after he chops off one of the rooks, has a rook and two pawns for two minor pieces, but the two minor pieces will be very nicely placed, while the pawns on a6 and c5 will prove to be extremely weak. And there's not, many open files either. So let's go back to the game, which was queen f6 instead of knight f6. I mean, in that line, I just preferred queen e3. I didn't like the sacrifice as much. Okay, queen c3. This seemed to be the idea behind queen f6, to get the knight here to blockade. And now a5, exclamation point. Instead of my lazy bishop f1, I played a4, a5 a move later. But a5 would have been thematic, destroying black's queenside pawn chain at the base and gaining a clear advantage. Summary. Knights are minor pieces along with bishops and are generally given a point count value of 3, the same as bishops. Knights crave advanced support points, i.e. a safe square that can't easily be challenged by a hostile pawn. Since they are short-range pieces, having access to such a square is a huge part of proper knight strategy. Knights gain in strength as they move further up the board. As a rule of thumb, a knight stuck on the first or second ranks is a defensive piece and is inferior to a healthy bishop. A diseased bishop is quite another matter. A knight on the third rank is a flexible workhorse and can be used for defense or attack at a moment's notice. A knight on the third often has serious central influence. A knight on the fourth rank support point is a very strong flexible piece. You can count on it to ably perform both defensive and offensive duties. A knight on the fifth rank support point can be a beautiful thing to behold. It's a potent offensive weapon and is usually superior to a bishop. A knight on a sixth rank support point can make children weep and women cry for joy. Here a knight transforms from horse to octopus, its many appendages spiking out in all directions and claiming enemy territory as its own. Such a knight is, at times, stronger than a rook. A knight on the 7th and 8th ranks gives us a case of diminishing returns. Once past the 6th, it no longer controls as many squares since its reach runs out of board. Usually a knight on such an advanced rank is performing some sort of tactical or search and destroy operation. Knights are the best blockaders of enemy passed pawns. The reason for this is simple. Unlike other pieces, a knight that's sitting in front of an enemy pawn isn't losing any of its mobility. Advantage knight. Knights are short-range pieces. Unlike bishops, which can slide the length of the board in a single move, knights are more quote-unquote restrained. Advantage bishop. Knights can jump over other pieces. There isn't anything else that can do this. Advantage knight. Knights have the potential to attack or defend anything on any colored square. It might take several moves, but eventually they will get there. Bishops are always stuck on one color. Advantage knight. Knights do quite well in close positions because, unlike bishops, pawns can't block them. Advantage knight. Because knights are short-range pieces, you need to calmly march them to the desired post. This might take 2 or 3 moves, but it's something that needs to be done. If you hear a square calling out to your knight, or see a beckoning glow, do everything in your power to get your horse there. It doesn't matter if you have to move forward, backward, sideways, or a combination of all these things to reach it. Just because a minor piece is nicely developed to the usual respected squares on the third rank doesn't mean it's doing anything from that post. Does it have a future on that square? Is it working with the other pieces towards the fulfillment of some unified plan? If the answer to these questions is no, then it's important that you find a better home for the horse and then do your utmost to get it there.